know you're out there in Nashville. The draft starts tonight, but I got to know first and foremost, who we trading for? Who we getting? What's the big name, Walt? Who's the big guy that we're getting for the Carolina Hurricanes? Who's that guy, right? Is it Mitch Marner? Who we got?
Well, fellas, first and foremost, I got to say thank you for the intro music. Nothing brings a smile to my face more. Always on cue. But to answer the question, Dennis, I'm going to have to keep you on your toes for a little bit longer, unfortunately. Patience is the big word of the day, with especially Carolina picking 30th tonight. It's going to be I don't want to say a long night because it's a fun day. It's a great day, right? I mean, the draft only happens once a year, so it'll be exciting to see, especially what happens at the top part of tonight's NHL draft. There are some big question marks as to who could go where, but as we know, with this front office group, anything is possible. So I don't want to say, don't watch tonight because the potential for the big splashes could be there. But for the interim, Carolina scheduled to pick 30th.
All right, Walt Ruff joining us right now, Hurricanes.com. Walt, I know you're going to look fresh and be freshly dressed out there. I do want to ask you about this, though. What kind of value can the Hurricanes possibly get for the number 30 pick, just in case if they want to trade out of it, they don't want to pick anybody with that 30th overall pick tonight?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Chris. The best example was ultimately not that far back down the line in 2021 when the Canes elected to move back out of the first round. I think what the most possible situation on a night like tonight is the team likely has a short list of names of who they could be interested in at that spot, and if those names aren't available, then potentially we see them move backwards because like we saw a couple years ago, they traded back out of the first round, and then they wound up picking at number 40 and number 51 on the second day of the draft, and they picked Scott Morrow and Alexi Himasalmi, two names that Bill Koivunen at 51, I believe, two names who a lot of people within the organization are very excited about. So, yes, you can get somebody that you can be very excited about at number 30, but you can also potentially get two players you can wind up very excited about not that far back in the order. So it's definitely something that could be a possibility tonight, and I'm eager to see if that does come to fruition.
Walt Ruff, Hurricanes.com, joining us here on the Keister Automotive Group hotline alongside Chris Lea Dennis Cox here with you. Because they have 9 picks, is there potential that they could even, if there's a guy out there that they really like, could even move up in the draft?
Yeah, definitely. And that's the wonderful thing about having those extra picks in your arsenal. You can put together packages, and we've seen it go the other way as well, as recently as last year when in the 6th round, Carolina elected to just flop with Chicago, who, of course, as we know, has the number 1 pick tonight. So even something as small as trading a late round pick this year for a late round pick next year. And again, it might only be a difference of 10 to 20 spots. That's a possibility, but it could also go the other way, right? You could, as you mentioned, put a package of those picks together. If there's a name who you didn't think was still going to be available at a certain slot, and you have the inventory to give up to get that player at that slot, I'm sure it's something that the team will consider.
Walt, I know that the Carolina Hurricanes are going to make a lot of moves over the next few days, including with the draft, where there's going to be signing new players when free agency begins, or even trading for new players, and, of course, drafting players during the NHL Draft. But there have been a lot of these names that end up getting drafted over the last few years. Of course, besides what's my man's name? I'm trying to think of really quick. Number 24. Help me out, man.
Seth Jarvis?
Seth Jarvis. Yes. Seth Jarvis had a quick ascent to the roster. A lot of these guys we haven't seen because they're still developing and still in the AHL or other leagues. Is there a possibility for maybe one of these other players, if the Canes don't find somebody that they want for the right value to bring in, that maybe one of the players that are developing is ready to come up to the main roster and potentially play more next season?
Yeah, there are a couple of names to keep an eye on when training camp rolls around. And like you said, a lot can happen and a lot will happen between now and then, starting with the draft tonight, free agency on Saturday, and then as we saw last year, the 2 splash trades with Brent Burns and Max Pacioretty. And yes, the Pacioretty one didn't exactly pan out in year 1 how everyone had hoped, but it's nice to know that the team isn't afraid to make that sort of move. And part of that byproduct is there are so many teams around the league that are in a bit of trouble when it comes to the cap right now, and there are only a handful that have more cap space than the Carolina Hurricanes. So if somebody's looking to offload a player like we saw with the Pacioretty situation, or even in San Jose where they knew they weren't going to be a competitive team this year and they got rid of Brent Burns, certainly the possibility for that move exists. But to get to more of the question at hand, Vasily Ponomarev is the first name that comes to mind in regards to somebody that played in the American League this past season. We heard his name come up during the playoffs a little bit because he was traveling with the team to New York after the slew of injuries. He's somebody who he had a really nice first full professional season in North America. He played some juniors in North America before going back to Russia for a little bit. And now he's knocking on the door of a potential lineup spot. He looked really, really good at last year's training camp, but of course he was only 20 years old at the time, and I don't think anybody expected him to be on the radar as much as he was. So if I had to give you that one name to keep an eye on for the fall that you said that could potentially be able to make the jump and was drafted in recent years, I definitely would go with Vasily Ponomarev.
Walt Ruff, Hurricanes.com, joining us on the Keister Automotive Group hotline. Free agency starts on Saturday. This is the first day that Sebastian Aho can sign a long-term contract extension with the Carolina Hurricanes. We've seen Pierre-Luc Dubois get $8.5 million per year. We saw Timo Meier with the New Jersey Devils get $8.8 million per year. Both of those contracts 8 years long. Where do we see Sebastian Aho possibly falling in his pay range? Is it equal or around both of those guys, or potentially more around $9+ million a year?
You'd have to think it's going to be somewhere within that ballpark, right? And of course, that's for the more the smarter folks than I should say, to figure out that exact contract value. But those are two names that certainly you can bring up to be a part of that conversation and where that contract extension is hopefully going to fall. Obviously, that's something that the team is hoping to get done. I know there are rumors that could potentially be done already, but we know how those sorts of rumors fly this time of year. We've heard Tom Dundon's desire and express to try and get that done as close to July 1, as possible. Don Waddell said the same thing. So that could potentially be coming this weekend. But in terms of value, it's hard to not feel like that 8-9 range is certainly somewhere where it could lie.
All right. Well, I'm excited to see what ends up happening tonight, and also for subsequent nights. I know that you're going to be busy, of course, because you have a lot to report on for the Canes. But as we kind of wrap this up and say goodbye for you, so you can have a great time in Nashville, how late are you going to be staying up the next few nights, making sure we get all the information on Hurricanes.com?
Well, hopefully not too late, unless, of course, there are other activities taking place on Broadway. It's a very dangerous place. But for the work-related events, obviously tonight we're expecting it to be a little bit of a late one with Carolina coming in at the 30th pick. Tomorrow's going to be a quick day. It'll be about from 11 a.m. Eastern until about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And again, the Canes are, as of right now, expected to make 8 picks. And then Friday should be a bit of a lighter day. And then Saturday will, of course, be the first day of free agency. Starts at 12 noon Eastern. Again, you can find all of that information at Hurricanes.com, and hopefully we'll have some good news for you there in regards to exciting moves for the team.
One final question for you in terms of those exciting moves and people can read. Are we going to hear anything about Freddie Anderson and or Antti Raanta?
Ooh.
It's a big question, right, Dennis? I mean, you got to figure something out in the goaltending situation. You have Pyotr Kochetkov locked up right now, but of course, those are two guys that I'm sure are garnering some interest around the league because of their play the last couple of years. If Carolina is hoping to have that three-headed monster back, you'd have to envision that would be something that could also come sooner rather than later. So we'll see. That's a good question, and an area that Carolina will certainly want to address within the first few hours of free agency.
That's Walt Ruff, Hurricanes.com. Give him a follow on Twitter at Walt Ruff. Thanks for your time. Enjoy Nashville, sir.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate you.